Planning to, yeah.
Cool.
Welcome everyone. My name is James Quinn. I'm a Salesforce architect here to present the solution for universal safety technologies. So an overview, they are a provider of safety and security systems to commercial customers in the US and Canada. Their main processes are system design, installation, monitoring, and maintenance. Their pain point is that they're struggling with systems that are not well integrated, leading to additional work for employees. And their goal is to better protect people and assets from fire and theft by creating a more unified, automated, and integrated system using Salesforce. Some broad assumptions: secure data by default at rest and in transit, buy before build, MVP approach. REST is available where the protocol is not mentioned, and only one prospective project is being designed for each location at one time. We'll see more of that in the data model. Design tool can be modified to support Canvas apps, can protect a client secret, and all systems can initiate integrations. Org strategy will be single org. There was no explicit compliance requirement for data residency, forcing us to a multi-org approach. There is a unified global business process. We're able to manage within the governor limits of a single org. They're able to collaborate and report across that single data set in one org as well. And we'll be using multi-language and multi-currency. More details on that in a little bit. Actors and licenses. Internally, we've got system specialists. They'll have Sales Cloud. They'll be working with Opportunity and Order. Support rep will have a Service Cloud license due to omni-channel. They'll be working with Cases, Service Cloud Voice, and also Leads. Managers will have a Sales Cloud and Tableau CRM licenses. They have reporting on sales objects and cross-platform analytics. Externally, we've got contractors, which have a customer community license. They did not have any need for advanced sharing, reporting, or sales objects. We've got primary customer contacts, which have a customer community plus license due to the need for delegated external administration and advanced sharing with Apex. Secondary customer contacts, customer community for the same reason as the contractor. Role hierarchy, we presume a CEO at the top. On the service side, we've just got two roles, US and Canada. And then on the sales side, we've got headquarter manager, beneath that regional manager, beneath that a office manager, and beneath that a system specialist. And lastly, beneath that, a primary customer contact, which is a separate role per account, an external role. Those accounts are owned by the system specialists. These two roles, office manager, system specialist, are a role per office, and regional manager is a role per region. System landscape. So first, how they access Salesforce. The internal employees have their identity stored in Active Directory. There is existing single sign-on with a couple of these systems, so I'm assuming that they have Active Directory Federated Services set up as the IDP. Existing SSO is into the 3 monitoring systems and 2 ERP systems. We can also use this ADFS for SAML SSO into Salesforce, including SP initiated flavor to support the deep linking use case that was mentioned. Customers will use a mobile publisher app and together with Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn to log into the experience site customer community. And the internal users, which are the system specialists, will use the Salesforce mobile app in the field, which both of these will use a user agent flow to connect to Salesforce that comes out of the box with these products. I considered hybrid and native apps for both of these, but there was no requirement for either one in terms of perfect branding or maximum performance required. Contractors, the last use case, will have a username and password login to the contractor community experience site, which is separate from the customer experience site, just via a browser. Within Salesforce, we'll have My Domain enabled to support SSO and the communities. Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Service Cloud Voice, Tableau CRM for cross-platform and LDV analytics, reports and dashboards for on-platform, smaller volume operational reports, and then Salesforce files with a storage limit of about 7.3 terabytes. We'll show how we got to that later, but together with a files archival strategy that will be sufficient in this case to meet all the files use cases mentioned as part of this project. And there is a website that will be connecting directly to Salesforce via a web to lead form to create leads. All other integrations will go through either the ETL or the ESB to support our integration strategy of decoupling systems and avoiding point-to-point integrations. These systems will centralize error handling, retry logic, logging, things like that. And so the ETL will be used for non-real-time periodic large volume operations, such as the data migration from the legacy CRM, as well as the ERP and monitoring systems into Salesforce as part of the go live, and also archival of Salesforce records that are no longer operationally needed on platform, as well as their associated files to a data warehouse that I assume supports blob storage. The ESB will be more for event-driven and near real-time integrations with smaller volumes of data at one time, and will also orchestrate the calls to the correct systems, like for instance, which ERP or monitoring system to call based on a geography. It can also handle transactionality for transactions involving more than one system. So the systems that it will help us integrate with are the ERP and the 3 monitoring systems, which have a pre-existing connection to the devices where the devices update the monitoring systems. And then the website will integrate via the ESB to Salesforce as well for one use case. Moving on to the data model. So first the legend, each box is an object. Object name is in the middle, org by default top left, owner top right, volume bottom right, and whether it's LDV in the bottom left. All relationships turned out to be lookups here. There are no master detail relationships. I forgot to actually draw the, sorry. All of these objects ended up standard except for one. I forgot the blue outline for this financial data custom object here, but all the others are standard Salesforce objects. You can see some abbreviations I've used for org-wide defaults and owners here. So the process starts out with the lead creation for a customer that's interested in doing business with Universal Safety. It's private, managed by the support rep. It converts into an account, contact, and opportunity. Account is private, owned by the system specialist. Contact is controlled by parent. The opportunity is private and managed by the system specialist as well from that point. So that's a handoff from the support rep to system specialist. They further qualify the potential opportunity with a site visit that's modeled as a task, which is controlled by parent, also done by the system specialist. They add products based on what the customer is interested in. So that's using the typical price book entry product data model to support that. Eventually, it will result in an order. Order should have a lookup to opportunity that I forgot to draw there. The order process is also managed by the system specialist. I should have that labeled here. And then it is private as well. Uses the opportunity products become order products as part of that. And then a work order would be, first I should mention, so when the account is created, we collect location information as part of the pre-qualification process. So we can have the locations created at that point as well, which accounts have an average of 2 locations each. These are private, managed by the system specialist as well. And then the opportunities and orders and work orders would be against a particular location via these lookup fields here. So the order results in a work order. We're using work order for three different use cases in this case. So the first one we're talking about is the installation, which is based on the order and the items that need to get installed get delivered, and this installation uh, work order manages the sort of the life cycle of that install process. It should actually, this asset represents the devices that are being installed. So it actually should have a lookup to the work order as well that I should have drawn. And then there's uh, the different types of work orders. So once the installation is complete, we would indicate a maintenance schedule, which are just fields on this work order, which results in future scheduled work to be done. And then additionally, cases can be raised either by customers or events from the devices themselves, which result in cases. This is a large data volume object. It's private, managed by the support rep. It's typically against one asset. Some of these cases can result in a work order of type unscheduled as well if it requires somebody to go on site and actually fix the device. So case, asset, work order are a large data volume objects here. More on that to come. For now, moving on into the business requirements. So the sales and design process, as mentioned, the prospective customers can phone call and route to an available support rep, and or they can submit information request from the website that's we're mandated to be keeping. Service Cloud Voice we will use for the phone calls. There's no existing telephony provider that's been mentioned here. Web to lead form will be on the website for intake that way. And then we'll have a lead assignment rule for that web to lead to route to a location-based queue with the notification checkbox checked so that the members of the queue are notified and somebody will take ownership from there. 5,000 customers per month through these channels is under the web to lead limit of 500 a day. They pre-qualify the customer from this point using a custom questionnaire. Then there's a site visit for the system specialist. So the questionnaire is just a screen flow on the lead, after which, if they qualify, then they would convert the lead into the account contact opportunity as mentioned. And then the site visit is again modeled as this task, which looks up to the opportunity that's manually created here by the support rep. So during this site visit, they use the site system specialists use the mobile app to take pictures and videos and upload them that need to be accessible from Salesforce, create a preliminary estimate and email to the customer, and capture the GPS info for the location. So we'll use the Salesforce mobile app for this use case with an LWC to use the geolocation API to get the GPS info. And it would stamp it on the location, which is a grandparent record of this task. Task looks up to opportunity, which looks up to location. And then we would, and they'd also, this would enable them to upload the photos and videos to the location's files related list there so that the customer can see them later on. And then they'll use Conga to generate this preliminary estimate based on information from the opportunity record that was gathered as part of that questionnaire and throughout the site visit as well, and then email it to the customer from there. We'll use an after save flow as well to not only send the email, but insert the content document link to additionally link these file uploads to the location record. The reason we're doing that is the customer is not going to be, with their license, is not going to be able to see the opportunity. So we need to associate the files with the location as well, because the customers are going to need to be able to see them. The creation of the estimate allows the customer to access Salesforce to view the estimate, as I just mentioned. That'll be the files related list on location. So on the creation of the estimate, we need to provision the customer user So creating a user and relating it to the contact and account for the login access to the experience site. We'll use an after save flow with a scheduled path in order to do this asynchronously. And they can use chatter on the location for the collaboration use case mentioned. The design tool is then used by the system specialist. The file it creates can be over 100 MBs in size, and it needs to be accessible to the customer via Salesforce. We'll provide them a Canvas app on the location page layout to use the design tool there. In this Canvas app, we'll be passing, as part of the context of the signed request, the location's record ID so that the PDF can be saved against the correct record in the file's related list there. So we have an integration, two integrations actually. So the first one is the Canvas. So this is really just passing the representing the signed request, passing the context, including the record ID. It's a UI mashup using the Canvas technology to provide the seamless experience. Because if we didn't do this, and they would need to do a swivel chair integration where they open up another window in their computer and access the design tool separately, and then they have to create the file there and then manually upload it in Salesforce. That's very error prone and time consuming, which we don't want. So to meet the stated goals of this project, I think Canvas is a good fit to ensure perfect data integration here and reduce manual effort. And then the design doc saved in Canvas needs to call the ESB, and which remote calls in to Salesforce with the REST API to insert the content version PDF. This is externally initiated. It uses the ESB here rather than a direct point-to-point because this large file size could need error handling or retry logic, and we want the ESB to manage that as part of our integration strategy. Moving on, the system specialist notifies the customer once this is done, and then they can collaborate. The customer needs to digitally sign the updated estimate. So the system specialist will notify the customer with the chatter at mention. Then they can again use chatter to collaborate on the location record, and we'll be using Conga and DocuSign again for the document generation and e-signature respectively. The financial data is then provided and against the location record. So actually my data model financial data should have a lookup to location instead of account. So I should have that object, looking up to location instead. Other than that, it'll work the same way. So the system specialist creates this financial data custom object creation due to it'll be a separate object due to visibility requirement later, based on the phone conversation. And then we'll have an approval process on this record with a conditional second step to the regional manager based on the cost value. The Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn should be used to log in for the customers. So that's social sign-on. We'd set up auth providers for each one and registration handler as well. And then configure the login page of the community to surface those options. And this is authentication using the OpenID Connect flow. Onto contracting and installation. So the contractor is created and managed in ERP, should not be created or updated in Salesforce. So we'd have a validation rule to prevent the creation or edit of accounts of type contractor in Salesforce. This info should be sent from ERP to Salesforce daily, and they should be auto provisioned to access Salesforce. So we've got a scheduled nightly ETL job to get the contractor deltas in ERP and then upsert them into Salesforce using a batch data sync pattern via the bulk API. It's not real time and it's large volume. That's why we're using batch data sync with bulk API. Next, there's an after save flow on the account creation of a contractor with a scheduled path to provision the users for access, which generally creates the users, make sure it's associated with the contact and account, asynchronously. Select the contractor. So the system specialists select the contractor, and at which point they should get access to all these design docs, estimates, photos, and videos that have been mentioned throughout this process. So what selecting a contractor means in this case is populating a contractor account custom lookup on the location field, location object. So as you can see, location actually has two lookups to account, one to customer, one to contractor. At this point, the contractor lookup will be populated. We'll have a sharing set for the contractor profile where the location contractor account equals the user account granting edit access. Then there's collaboration between all the parties. The system specialist can revise the documents and repeat the approval if necessary. So we'll have chatter from all these parties on the location object. The system specialist could revise the designs in the Canvas app again and repeat the integrations I mentioned, and again use Conga and DocuSign to again get the e-signature from the customer representing their approval. Once the design is approved by or acceptable to contractor, then we need their acceptance as well. So then we generate a separate contracting agreement between this one, instead of being between the customer and Universal Safety, this one's between the contractor and Universal Safety. It needs to be stored in Salesforce. So the contractor can just check a box on the location to indicate their acceptance. Which would trigger an after-save flow to initiate Conga doc generation, DocuSign e-signature, sort of reusing that approach, storing the result in the location files related list. The system specialist is notified of the acceptance and signature. They can then place the order for devices. So we have an after-save flow on the DocuSign envelope for the notification to the system specialist. The order is created, flagged as complete. Salesforce notifies ERP. The ERP detailed order data should be visible from within Salesforce. So the system specialist is going to manually create this order in Salesforce from the location, add the products, and then move to a complete status. Integration, we have an integration here. So when the order is marked complete in Salesforce, it'll have a, that will trigger an after-save flow, which will publish a platform event. The ESB will subscribe, call into the ERP to create the sales order. We need an orchestration here from the ESB to know the correct ERP to call based on geography. And there's no need for any reply or confirmation. That's why we're using fire and forget. And then my assumption is the detailed order data changes sometimes, so we can't just get it up front as part of the integration I just described. So we need a separate integration. My other assumption is that the detailed order data is a flat structure on the order level, not some sort of data hierarchy or line items. So yeah, so when the sales order attributes change, these detailed attributes that we need to know about, when they change in ERP will call the ESB, which will remote call in the Salesforce REST API to update the order details or status, which are just fields on the order record that are controlled by the ERP via this integration. It's externally initiated and it's a small volume operation, thus the pattern. So the ERP updates the order status all the way through the point of arrival. So this is covered by the previous integration I just mentioned. The ERP can not only update the details, but the status as well in Salesforce. Of course, when this first, I should mention, when Salesforce first creates the order in ERP, it passes the Salesforce order ID so that the ERP can call back and update the correct order. So once the order arrives, the system specialist and contractor get the SMS and email notification. So this same integration I just talked about, ERP will notify via the ESB Salesforce, mark the order as delivered. after save flow will be triggered to create a work order of type installation and send an email and an SMS to the system specialist and contractor. This is why we're using the SMS Magic App Exchange product. So during the installation, the device is added. It's connected to the monitoring system. That, I assume, is pre-existing functionality. But then they want this process to automatically create a record in Salesforce for this device and associate it with the customer location. The device to monitoring system, yeah. So as far as that, we'll have an integration. So when the device is created in the monitoring system will call the ESB, which calls Salesforce to create the asset with a remote call-in REST API. This is, yeah, for the pattern is for the same reasons as before. The way it will associate to the correct location. So actually this will, my assumption is that the location GPS data is available within the device itself or the monitoring system to populate. So we'll be able to use this to query the the location record in Salesforce, which also has the GPS data that it got from the site visit earlier on in the process, to match the correct, look up the ID of the correct location and populate the asset's location lookup with that ID, all as part of this integration here. So the asset, that's how this asset location lookup gets populated. Once the installation is final, Salesforce is updated by a system specialist. The final information is sent to the ERP to create an invoice. So the SS manually updates the installation or the work order status to final, which kicks off another integration where Salesforce will have an after save flow kick in, publish a platform event, ESB will subscribe to that channel, call into the ERP to create the invoice. That's again orchestrated to call the correct ERP, and there's no need for any reply or confirmation here, thus fire and forget. Scheduled maintenance process. The maintenance schedule is set by the system specialist when upon completion of the installation, and then managed by the support center afterward. And the average location is serviced twice a year. So the maintenance schedule I've modeled just as a set of fields on the work order of type installation, which is a record type, and the page layout will have these fields. It'll have a section for this scheduled maintenance, which indicate fields such as the last scheduled maintenance date, the next scheduled maintenance date, the frequency required of maintenance, and we'll be using those fields to automatically generate the scheduled maintenance work orders from that point on. I'll explain that in a bit. So then they change the ownership from themselves to the support rep queue for that region, and someone will take ownership from there. So when the scheduled maintenance is 1 week away, they need to create this service order in the appropriate ERP. So we'll have a nightly scheduled flow, which will query the work orders of the type installation, where the next scheduled maintenance field is 7 days from today. And then for each of those, it will create a work order of type maintenance, of type scheduled maintenance. And based on that, we'll have an integration which passes the info about the work that needs to be done to the correct ERP. So that is okay. That is shown here. So ultimately, it's the scheduled flow nightly that kicks this off. Salesforce will publish the flow will publish a platform event for each of these scheduled maintenance work orders that get created. The ESB will subscribe, call into the ERP to create the service order. Again, there's no need for any reply or confirmation. So once that scheduled maintenance is complete, The system specialist updates this, and then the ERP needs to be updated in real time. So the system specialist will manually update the maintenance work order in Salesforce to complete using a quick action on the Salesforce mobile app. And we'll have an integration here where, again, Salesforce will have an after save flow when the maintenance work order is marked complete. That'll publish a platform event via fire and forget pattern. ESB will subscribe to that, call into the ERP to update the service order. Again, no need for a reply or confirmation there. So once the scheduled maintenance, I just went over that. So moving on to monitoring and issue management, there's 3 different ways they can intake issues. One is the monitoring system, one is from customers, and the last one is from support reps themselves. So as far as the monitoring systems, they continue to perform their existing functions. So they are responsible for contacting emergency services. No work required there as part of this project. Real-time API calls are possible from the monitoring system, it mentions, and they want Salesforce to be updated when certain events only are raised in monitoring system, and they want it to raise an issue and a task as for the support rep to call the customer. So we'll have an integration here where the monitoring system will call the ESB, which will remote call in the Salesforce REST API to create both a case and child task. When only certain events are raised in the monitoring system. It's externally initiated and a small volume of data, thus the pattern and API use choice here. Case should have a task hanging off of it as well. I forgot to draw that one. And that will be actually large data volume as well. So the issues raised by the customer contacts, they log into Salesforce and submit issues. We can use the out-of-the-box contact support component on the Experience site or mobile publisher. The devices are fitted with barcodes. They need to take pictures of the barcodes and associate that with the issue. So they can just take a picture and upload it to the case-related list. They'll have a sharing set granting them access to that case. More on that in a minute. Case assignment rule will be to geography-based queues, and then from there, Omnichannel will pick it up and do skill-based routing based on the expertise to the right agent. Maintenance task will be created here from the case if needed, which creates the service order in ERP in real time. And this time we need a feedback of confirmation of success. The service, the SR creates the work order manually using a screen flow. And then we have another integration here, which is the request and reply for using the screen flow and external services when they advance the flow. That'll call ESB, which will call the ERP to create the service order. They need to, the reason we're not just reusing integration 8, which is very similar, is this time they need the immediate confirmation or error message. So that's why we need to do it differently and have the request and reply pattern for that synchronously. Issues created by support reps can be done when they get phone calls manually. So they're using Service Cloud Voice to receive the phone calls. There's no action. We don't need to build anything for this project. It's just manual case creation here. So each location gets the 20 issues per year. Of these, half require work orders. So that's where we got these large data volume calculations. So 6 million cases a year, 3.6 million work order, 3 million assets total. And then the files, you can see this is 3680 internal licenses times 2 gigabytes plus 10 gigabytes is roughly 7.3 terabytes. And then we've got photos and videos from the leads site visit. We've also got the barcode photos from the customer related to cases. And then we've got the various types of estimates and contract signed documents. The signed documents are relatively small in file size, so we should be able to manage them long term, no problem. These photos and videos, after the opportunity becomes closed one, or actually after the installation is complete, we should not need these photos and videos to be stored on platform anymore. And also after the closure of the case, we should not need the barcode photos on platform anymore. So we can archive each of those with ETL nightly jobs, which query the related records that meet those archival criteria, and then archive both the records and their associated files, as well as the content document links, so that we have the linkage from each file to each record. Case, we can, as I mentioned, archive them after they are closed. Work order, same thing. Asset, it's not a huge data volume. We'll mostly be relying on selective queries based on standard indexes, and one custom index on the status field for some of our list views that I'm anticipating, but mostly it'll be referenced via the related list from the account, which has a built-in standard index based on the lookup. Moving on to data migration. So we are migrating from these source systems to ERPs. The legacy CRM we're sunsetting, the monitoring system, and then the desktop computers, which are where the design docs are stored. One note on this, so we need to centralize all of these in a shared drive first. So we have our users load them here, and we need to establish a naming convention for these files. So it'll have the ERP order ID, so that we're able to link the file to the relevant Salesforce record based on the external ID there. You can see all the objects we're loading. I'm not going to name them all, but we'll use an ETL process to first extract all the data from these source systems, save them into a staging raw format database first, run some scripts to standardize, cleanse, dedupe, and enrich. We work with the business and data stewards to define the matching and deduplication logic there. And then we would transform them into a canonical schema and then into a Salesforce schema. We would, all with scripts as well with the ETL. Any old data or data that we don't need for operational purposes, we can load to the data warehouse straight to archival. That's leads over 5 years, orders over 3 years, etc., closed cases, opportunities that are closed, etc. So then from there, we sort by the parent ID to minimize lock contention risk, sequence in the order I've listed here, and then use the external IDs to maintain the relationships among the different data elements, and also from the new records in Salesforce to map them to the correct corresponding records in ERP and the monitoring system going forward. So first we load into a Dev Pro environment, then a partial, then a full copy sandbox, and then eventually production. The first 2 loads would be small volume, just tests of the process and sanity tests. Staging would be the end-to-end full test. We'd know how long it takes and whether it can meet the cutover window based on that. And then production, we would load the same way. We all use the bulk API in 2.0 in parallel mode. We deactivate automations and validations, defer sharing, enable parallel sharing recalculation, and then reactivate after the fact and resume and recalculate the sharing, and then ultimately thorough testing with our stakeholders. Moving on to accessibility. So system specialists view and edit the customer and installed system data for their own customers. This is ownership of the account and asset, which they will have. System specialists need to see other data in their local office for the same objects. So we'll have owner-based sharing on the account per office to share with the users with the same roles as the owner. We do the same for asset as well. I considered criteria-based sharing, but it would be over the limit because there's 150 offices. Financial data is org-wide default, and there's no sharing rules, so that's how it stays private. Managers need to see, similarly, edit all the customer and installed data in their respective areas, including the financial data. That's all done via the role hierarchy they'll get based on the system specialist roll-up. Contractors need to edit data related to customer locations they've been assigned, except for financial data. So that would be a sharing set on the location's customer account, contractor account. I mentioned this earlier. Customer should be able to edit only their own information. So org-wide default is private on account and asset. We'd have sharing sets on the account to raise the access to edit, and on the asset as well with edit access. There's some customers that are in a hierarchy. The primary customer contact need to see the location and subordinate data across all these related accounts. So to meet this, I'm recommending Apex sharing of the location records when the accounts are updated to be in a hierarchy. Support center representatives should see all data in their geography only, except for the financial data. So we'd use 2 criteria-based sharing rules for each of these objects that is org-wide default private, except for the financial data so that each of these would have a geography field. One sharing rule would be to the US role, and one would be to the Canada role. Onto reporting. Support reps, system specialists, and managers run reports on sales activity and schedules. So that's just Salesforce reports on opportunities and work orders. So, the same people need to run reports on the device monitoring events for the customers they have access to. This is a Salesforce report on case, with the assumption that what this means is they're only interested in the events that have resulted in issues and have not been archived yet. Managers need to run ad hoc trending on monitoring activity. So that's Tableau CRM for this cross-platform LDV analytics that lives in the monitoring system. Customer contacts need to see issues with their statuses. That's just a case list view. The report needs to be run live from the public website with the number of monitoring events and installations for US and Canada. That's going to be a request and reply integration from the website via the ESB into the really it's a remote call in into Salesforce via the REST API to get that data. My assumption is there's low traffic to this particular page of the website, so we won't run into API limits. English and French need to be supported. That's translation workbench, custom labels, Visualforce email templates, community translations, and language selector component that we'll be using there. Recommendations how to manage the project would be hybrid. So waterfall for the overall delivery to make sure we meet the deadline and make sure testing starts on time to do that. And also for the integrations for a contract first approach to enable parallel development. And for the rest, we use Agile for fast iterations, common demos, and learning early in the process about any issues, a shift left approach to get ahead of any issues. It saved time and effort working on the wrong things. For prioritization, that was a difficulty for them here. We'd use the steering committee for strategic prioritization and JIRA for more tactical prioritization, as well as requirements traceability. Some additional risks, highly regulated. We want legal compliance and InfoSec and the COE. The geographically separate teams responsible for ERP and monitoring system. We need strong central governance to ensure that the teams are following the standards, conventions, design principles, etc., and to align schedules and tooling. Only one dev and one test environment. We need strong communication between the teams of who is using which environment for what and when, and avoid conflicts that way. And we'd reuse these environments for multiple purposes out of necessity. Big bang release they want to do in 4 months. I would negotiate a phased release as part of the governance process, take an MVP approach due to the very short timeline, set expectations of what is possible in the timeline, and then use the steer code to make sure this is the top priority for resourcing. And then the ERPs have different order management due to regulatory requirements. So again, consult legal and COE to make sure that we don't have to do completely separate processes for the CRM. Governance structure would have the executive sponsor leading a steering committee with a vision, strategy, and priority would be set. COE, you can see here, their stakeholders it sets the standards, enablement, communication, adoption, gets the buy-in and alignment. It helps with the um, yeah architecture review board would set the design principles, style guides, and do coaching of the technical resources. PMO manages the schedules, escalates any delays to the steering committee. And I think I am out of time, which is
All
concerning.
right. No flows today
No.
and no environments.
Yeah, that was really bad. Got
Yeah.
bogged in down.
Tomorrow you will have more adrenaline, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That will speed you up.
Yep.
Uh, okay. First question. Um, which currencies are you going to be using?
The Canadian dollar and the US dollar.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And are you recommending which type of currency management?
Uh, advanced currency management with the data exchange rates.
Mm-hmm. Why?
Uh, I'm just presuming that they would want to maintain the historical accuracy of previous opportunities, so that they're not always updated to the current exchange rates if they closed a long time ago.
Where does it surface this advanced currency management, in which parts of the application?
Just on the opportunities and opportunity products in my data model.
How about orders?
Advanced currency management does not work with orders.
Okay, thank you. Hamza?
If you can just navigate to your licensing, please.
Sure.
So you selected, you've got sales card licenses for system specialist and the manager, and then you've got a service card license for the support rep. Can you just talk me through why the service card license, please?
Yeah, the main reason was omni-channel, but also they're primarily using cases and using Service Cloud Voice.
Is the service card license a prerequisite for omni-channel and cases and service cloud voice?
Omni-channel, yes, it is. The others, no.
Okay, thank you.
I have follow-up question on your selection of Service Cloud Voice. How do you justify the investment in this product versus some other options?
They didn't have any existing telephony, so that would be the easiest one to set up, the most native to Salesforce, for faster time to market and lower total cost of ownership. They did have inbound phone calls that needed to be routed with omni-channel, and it would work seamlessly with other channels if we go with Service Cloud Voice.
Which other Salesforce product would support this requirement?
We could use OpenCTI as well.
Mm, that's more of an integration, but there is another product that provides this capability.
Amazon Connect.
Nope.
Lightning Dialer.
Yes.
Yeah, it's geographically limited, and they are only in North America, but I would, in case they want to expand to other regions that may not be covered by that product.
Right, but for the current scenario, which regions do they need to cover?
US and Canada for now.
So would it be perhaps better suited for the current needs?
Yeah, if they don't have any plans to expand geographically, yes.
Is there any mention in the scenario about any potential plans at all?
No, there was no mention in this scenario.
Okay. Thank you.
If you can just go to, in your solution document, if you can just go to contracting and installation. I think one of the earlier, on the first few points of the requirement. Yeah. So in here, you've on point one, you mentioned that you're using a validation rule to prevent the creation or the edit of all accounts of type contractor. And you're doing this because they shouldn't be created or updated in Salesforce. They're managing the ERP systems. If you're using integration 3 to create these accounts, how are you ensuring that the integration is excluded from your validation rules?
Right. So the validation rule will need to have an exception for uh, a specific profile, so that it does not fire for the integration user profile.
Thank you. And then for point 2, there you mentioned that when they're selecting a contractor, they're populating the actual lookup on the location, where you are filtering the contract profile, right? The location contract account equals user account. So that you're given the ability to the system specialist to select the contractor. How are you ensuring that the contractor is, one, available, and two, doesn't have too much work on already? Is it a free for all, or are you managing this in some way?
Yeah, I didn't see a specific requirement around that, so I assumed that this was done manually.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
So, have you considered using the quote object at all?
Yeah, I did consider it for the estimate use cases.
Mm-hmm. And why have you decided the way you decided?
There were lots of requirements around customer interaction with the estimate, as well as chatter, being able to view the estimate within Salesforce and chatter about it, etc. And that would have necessitated a partner community license for over 700,000 users, which I did not think was justified. So I would have rather used a different object that they can access.
Right, but the way you solved it, you generate the PDFs of opportunity, but you are not giving them access to the opportunity. You are giving them access to location. So in that case, could you not have used the quote in the same manner and have the record of the previous versions of the quotes?
Yeah, if there is a need to maintain a history, as you mentioned, then quote is absolutely the I should be using quote. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So if you're on the data model, which is perfect. So on the asset, you mentioned that you've got, on the asset object, you mentioned that you've got large data volumes. How much storage are the asset records taking up?
I should have mentioned they don't count against storage.
So what's the impact of the large data volume on the asset object? They don't count towards storage.
Yeah, overall, the reason we need large data volume mitigation strategies in general here are to prevent performance-related issues such as query timeouts on those objects or record locking, perhaps in the case of a SKU. more so than any data limit concerns. So yeah, it's to optimize the system performance and provide a good user experience.
Okay, thank you.
So for your maintenance requirements, I believe you were using a scheduled flow. Could you go into that section, please?
Sure.
Maintenance, yeah. Here you were using scheduled flow. On which object are you running the flows, or the flow, shall I say?
On the work order.
Mm-hmm. And what is the expected volume of that object?
It's so given that I'm using for the 3 different types, it's roughly 3.6 million per year. However, the vast majority will be archived upon their completion. So at any given time in the system, I would expect a volume of a few 100,000.
So are you aware of any potential issues you could run into using this mechanism on such a large volume?
If we definitely have to test, and we can use Apex if it runs into scalability issues with Flow. My thought was that it's querying a large number. However, most of them are sort of ignored by the process since they don't have a date in 7 days. So it would be a relatively, manageable volume, a few hundred records, maybe a couple thousand that we would actually return from the query and operate on, which would be possible with Flow.
What is the limit of number of records you could potentially operate on as a maximum?
A 10,000.
Nope.
No?
It's 2,000 elements
Oh.
in a flow.
Huh.
Okay,
Okay.
we can discuss later. But as a side point, it's always easier, safer to go with batch Apex.
Mm-hmm.
Just yeah, I wouldn't risk it because in the future you don't know how many records you may have there. So even in your testing, you can have successful tests, and in the future you may run into issues due to scalability. But yeah, sorry to start discussion. Yeah, let's go back to Q&A. Sorry, Hamza, you can go ahead.
If you can just go to the reporting section for me, please. And in the reporting section, point 3, you very quickly mentioned that you'll be using Tableau. Can you just talk me through your reasoning for using Tableau, please?
Yeah, so ad hoc trending on monitoring activity over various periods of time. So my assumption here is, and it also mentions monitoring system activity. So based on this being cross-platform with monitoring system, Tableau CRM can connect to multiple data sources and meet this requirement.
Okay. And how are you linking the monitoring system activity to the rest of the data?
See what other data we have here: customer type, geography, call device type. So it has the data on the device, and so it would be, my assumption is it would be, okay. So it has the serial number of the asset, which are sorry, of the device, which our asset records have in Salesforce, so it can be matched and joined based on that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about standard and custom index. So you gave few examples about which fields will be indexed. That's great. Could you also explain the difference?
Difference between standard and custom?
Yes.
The standard, you don't need to do anything to enable. They also have a higher selectivity threshold. They're built in on certain standard fields and also just types of fields. Custom, you need to contact Salesforce support to enable and request it on specific fields. Only certain data types are possible, and they have a much lower selectivity threshold.
Do you know the thresholds?
It's 30% for the first million for standard and 10% of the first million for custom. And then they go to each goes to half of that. Beyond that, up to a hard limit.
Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna ask you which type of fields are supported. I'm not that nasty today. Okay, thank you very much.
So can you go to your system landscape for me, please? So within the system landscape, you're using a variety of different certification methods. Can you just describe the user agent flow for me, please?
Sure. We'll take the Salesforce mobile app. So in terms of pure user agent, it would request a token from Salesforce. And based on the redirect URI matching the forgetting the name of the other parameter, but based on those parameters matching, Salesforce would be able to, via their connected app, authorize that application and return an access token so that I can call Salesforce APIs.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to dig a little bit deeper into this. So what sort of parameters are sent? And where are they sent?
Yeah, so that in the user agent flow, there's, first of all, I should mention there's no auth code dance there. It goes straight to requesting the token. The reason is the app cannot securely store the client secret, so that is not a parameter anywhere here. It just passes the client ID so that it can identify the correct connected app to verify the parameter match, and then return the access token.
What's the user interaction?
They are shown so if it's the first time using it, they would be shown well, in this case, it's layered with SAML from a user standpoint, so they will need to log in if they don't have a session with ADFS first. Then if it's their first time using it, once they have a Salesforce session, they need to get prompted to authorize the scopes to be shared from Salesforce to Salesforce mobile app.
How about other tokens are you aware of any other tokens being used?
Yeah, we would
Mhm.
configure the refresh token to be passed along with the access token by approving that scope.
Mm-hmm. When the initial request is sent, what is the response type requested?
Token.
And grant type?
I believe it's called implicit grant.
Correct. Thank you very much. Shall we as well cover JOT, our favorite one, since you are in swing?
Sure. You just want me to talk through the flow? Okay. So take the ESB, for example. It will first prepare the JOT token will use that in a call to the Salesforce authorization server, requesting an access token. Salesforce will previously have the certificate, which it can use to in order to translate the contents into to verify the signature really, and then validate the claims that are in the JOT payload, and then confirm the user has access to the connected app via profile or permission set, and finally then return the access token to the client, which is the ESP.
Okay, and my usual follow-up question, how is the token generated and which parts of certificates are being used where, and how is it validated?
Sure. So we'd be using a library such as a Java library to generate the JOT. Generally speaking, it is comprised of the headers, and then a dot, and then the payload, and then a dot, and then the signature. So it uses the private key to sign the first two parts, the headers and the payload, and then that signature would also become the third part of the JOT as well.
Which part of the key is used for the signature?
The
Of
private
the
key,
certificate? Yeah. Oh, I think you mentioned, right? Private key.
yeah.
Just yeah. And then how is it validated?
How is it? Oh, on Salesforce side. So Salesforce would previously have the connected app set up with the certificate uploaded. So it would use that certificate to validate the signature.
Which part of the certificate?
The it's the RSA 256.
Nope. So you used private key before, so now you are using which part?
The public key.
Yes. And okay, I will I'll park it here. That's fine. Let's move on.
Just to piggyback on that slightly. So you've covered the JOT flow. Within the ESP, between ESP and Salesforce, you also mentioned that you'll set up two-way SSL. Can you just describe that in a little bit more detail for me, please?
Yeah, so that is how we encrypt the data in transit. We would set up Salesforce to first request them to support to enable the permission to require two-way SSL. Then we would put that permission on the integration user's profile to require them to call APIs on the port 8443. And basically it's the mutual exchange of certificates to build trust between the two systems. So the client is verifying the server is also verifying the client.
Okay, thank you.
I would be interested if you could describe in more detail how is the interaction with the Canvas app going to work from the user perspective. So you said they will be starting in of the location object, if I remember.
Right, yeah. So it'll be in the page layout. So they'll load that page via their browser, and they will see that the design tool renders within that iframe window, which then they can work into. So from the user perspective, they don't need to know about the signed request and everything going on. So they just start working in the tool, and at the end they can click save, and that triggers the integration back to save that file in Salesforce.
So they will be, how are they going to be authenticated in the design tool from Salesforce?
Yeah, I should have stated. So my assumption is the design tool is a very simple tool. I didn't interpret the need for any authentication. It's just, it doesn't persist any data. It's just a provides a user experience to draw something, or a little bit more features than that, but it generally lets you create a PDF and that's it.
So if it's such a simple tool, how come you made assumption you will be able to make a call out to USB?
That was an assumption. I assume that it can be, we have a developer available that can modify it to both receive the Canvas request and also do the call out.
What if your assumption to modify the to UI to work with the Canvas SDK is correct, but it's not capable of making call out to USB? I think it's a fair assumption as well. I'm not just trying to throw a curveball at you. I think it's a realistic assumption. So how would it be solved?
Then I would make an assumption that it can store the file and we can have the ETL just polling it to retrieve that file, and and I would assume that it can have metadata like the record ID of the Salesforce record it should be saved against. The ETL can pull that and save it against the right record.
Before you use ESB, now you're using ETLs, or are you switching into different middleware?
Just to follow the general rule of thumb that we're using is the ETL for the non-real-time, non-event-driven sort of scheduled jobs. It could be done by either tool, though, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and back to the original question about the authentication. So now, would you need to authenticate the user?
I
How can Canvas work without authentication?
How can it work without?
Yeah,
Um,
isn't Canvas expecting authentication?
I mean, it can just render the UI inside the frame.
So if you don't need authentication, can you just use simple iframe then?
iframe, we still need to pass the context of the record ID in Salesforce securely, which can't be done with an iframe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so but wouldn't it be fair assumption that it would make sense to have a traceability of who created the design? Because it's going to be anonymous, right? If nobody is authenticating.
Okay, yeah, if that is a feature that they request, then yes, we can change the assumption and assume that there is authentication with that tool. And we can set up Salesforce as the IDP for the design tool as part of the same connected app that's enabled for Canvas.
We just still need to create those users in the design tool.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then what flow would you use to authenticate?
It would be SAML IDP initiated from Salesforce.
Right. And the request that is being sent from Canvas is called
The signed request.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you.
No further questions from me.
Oh, we exhausted everything. Okay. Let me double check. Desktop share. Okay, for your migration, so I was interested in how would you recommend to manage the move from the desktop to the shared drive?
Yeah, so we first need to centralize all the documents. So we'd need to do sort of a internal email campaign to get everybody and also manage with the COE business unit leaders sort of taking ownership of this effort. So get everyone to load the documents in a centralized shared drive first, and following a naming convention where we change the name of the files to include the ERP order ID that they are relevant to, so that we can parse that and associate them with the correct Salesforce records as part of this files load migration into Salesforce.
So that would mean everybody would be like all the internal users would be dropping their files into one shared folder and seeing each other files and potentially being able to corrupt them.
If that's a concern, we can give.
Like, would it be concern for you if you were the owner of the business?
If there's sensitive info in those files, or even if there's not, yeah, you make a good point that if they shouldn't be able to edit or delete the files for sure. So yeah, we would need to set something up where they can easily drop something in, but cannot actually view the contents of the folder.
Mm-hmm. And which tool are you going to leverage for the email campaign?
I think that's simple enough that we can just do it with Outlook or whatever their email client is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was just to trip you over. Okay. I think I'm done as well, pretty much. Well, actually, let me have one more. On your third integration, I was a little bit confused because you were talking about after save flow in your business requirements, and then it was saying integration number 3, and then I look into integration number 3 and it says scheduled nightly. Yeah, this one. Or is the after save flow continuation after the scheduled job run, and on the back of it, it will run after save flow, or?
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't totally clear with this. So yeah, the scheduled nightly is the creation of the contractor accounts that themselves, and that creation of those contractor accounts triggers a scheduled flow. Triggers an after save flow to do the rest, basically, which is
So
all
could
done
you not
inside
have
Salesforce.
could you not have your ETL job to do everything in
It,
one operation?
uh, Not in one operation, just because we'd get the mixed DML error for creating users and accounts in one transaction, but it could do it in two subsequent calls in. But I thought that was more complicated.
So you prefer to drive the second part of the logic on Salesforce?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Do you see that? Would you recommend it as a best practice?
Yeah. Salesforce has easy point and click tools to do asynchronous logic now, as mentioned here. So I thought that was something Salesforce admins will all be familiar with maintaining. So it'd be easy in the long run.
Okay. I think we can stop here. We can even stop the recording. Actually, this is something from